Well, welcome to our third part in our Carmen Zoom series. Today, we're going to be talking about student-to-student interactions, which means we're talking about breakout rooms today. So we have an hour filled with a lot of things to show you and to experiment with. So let's go ahead and get started. We have a nice set of participants here. I recognize quite a number of your names and faces, so welcome. My name is Stephanie Rodick, and I am in the professional learning team here in Odie, and I'll have Queenie introduce herself as well.
Hi there, my name's Queenie Chow, and I'm also on the professional learning team at Odie.
So I'm going to be walking us through some content and then getting us into some activities, and Queenie the entire time will be on the chat, and she's going to share with us, maybe we'll just do that now, Queenie, a little bit about how we're going to use the chat for questions, where they find the chat, etc.
Yeah, so if you're on a desktop and you don't already have the chat out, kind of bottom middle of your screen, there's a little speech bubble. So click on that and your chat will fly out. If you're on mobile, you might just have to tap or swipe on your screen to get to the chat window. So I'll go ahead and post something in there right now, and that should make your screen flash a little bit or give you notification. So that is a link to the slides as well as our workshop playlist on YouTube. But if you have questions throughout the session, just feel free to type them in the chat and I'll answer as many of those as I can, or we might save some for pauses throughout the session so Stephanie can address those.
Great, thank you. All right, so we have some outcomes for the entire series of our three-part series, and I'm curious, maybe with hand raises, you should see a little reaction button on your bottom of your screen, particularly if you're on a desktop. I'm curious to know how many of you have attended the two other sessions. The first one was on like just the basics. Queenie did that one. And the second one was on like using polls and sharing screens and that kind of thing. So in the reactions, you can give me you can give me a thumbs up, you can give me a yes, you can give me a no, any kind of reaction you want. So I'm looking in my participants window to see, and I could also see it on top of your videos. I'm just trying to get a sense of, all right, where we're at. So not everyone has attended all of them. So we are going to refer a little bit in some parts to previous sessions. So that playlist that Queenie linked has recordings of the first two sessions. They may be older than the ones we just did this month, but generally the same content. But I would definitely look at the basics one. If you haven't looked at it, look at the one that we just put up. I think it's up there, Queenie, or it will be soon on the one that Queenie just did. So the outcomes that we have they're really about understanding all the kinds of functions and tools that are embedded within the Carmen Zoom platform, and we want to think about how those tools can help us as instructors within our own context, our own teaching experiences, our own student context. How are ways to have a positive teaching and learning experience? So I will say that I've had to redo this entire session because Zoom just made a massive update. I think on the 3rd. It was literally a couple hours before we did the second part of the series last week. We didn't even know they did all of those changes. So there was a massive update, and then there have been little ones throughout the rest of the week. There was even just one last night that I had to update. So you will want to make sure, probably not now because you're already in here with us, but make sure that you have the most updated version of Zoom. So you have all of the functionality. What that did though is change a lot of the things that we were doing in these sessions. So I adjusted a couple of things, but I also wanted to share that there's a new book that came out. You see this, and it's called Teaching Effectively with Zoom, and it's by Dan Levy, not the Dan Levy from the TV show. That's why I was drawn to it. I was like, oh, he wrote a book on Zoom. This is Dan Levy from Harvard, and he wrote actually a second edition. He wrote his first one in the summer. I don't know, they're very prolific over there in Harvard, I guess. So he wrote two versions of this book. And he also has a podcast that both Queenie and I have listened to that we really like. Some of the tools have changed a little bit, but the general functionality is the same. So I adjusted this session with all of these new tools in mind, and we'll try some out today. All right, so I want to get a better sense of who you are. So let me find a little poll here. All right, so you should see a poll on your screen, and I'm interested in finding out in what capacity you will be using or have been using Carmen Zoom. You can select as many as are applicable to you. I have 50% that have voted so far. I don't think you guys can see that on your end. Once you select, I think it goes away. So I can see on my end that we've got almost 90% of you have voted, 22 of the 24 of you. Give it another second. Okay, we had some new people join us. So if you just joined us, feel free to click on the poll and answer in what capacity have you been using or will you be using Carmen Zoom? And thank you to those who wrote in the chat as well and gave us some more context for that. All right, so we're pretty close. I have 92%. So let's share out the results. So about half of you are teaching a course. That's actually a lot less than what we've had in the past. So this will be interesting. A lot of you have been hosting meetings. That is not surprising at all. And I see my fellow workshop facilitators. Welcome. This is a fun tool to attempt to use and translate from a face-to-face to an online version. And then supporting teaching of others also, like we myself. All right, good. We have a really nice mix of folks. So in the reactions down again on the bottom, you have a couple of choices with reactions. I am curious to know, have you used the breakout room feature in Carmen Zoom as a host in any of those capacities that you talked about before? So it doesn't matter, you can use the thumbs up, whichever reaction you think would fit that. So, okay, not a lot of you. Okay, so here's what I would like for you to do. I would like for you to make sure that you have the participants window open. There's a little participants button down the bottom. Open up the participants. And I gave you capacity to rename yourself. If you're one of the folks who told me, I've used this before, that this breakout room thing, I would like for you to go in and you can use them, hover over your name, and there's a little button that says, I think you should have the option of renaming yourself. For mine, it's under more. As a host, I never know what you guys see. And what I would like for you to do is to put an asterisk in front of your name. So put some symbol, asterisk is the easiest thing for me to see, in front of your name. And that way I can see as we move. Thank you, Jared. So Jared and Christine, Kelly, great. We have a, thank you. I'm so glad that you're following along. Okay. So I love using this as a way to, so don't rename yourself, just keep it there. This will help when I create breakout rooms later, so that I can make sure that you're mixed in with people who haven't used it before as we go along with the activity that we're going to do. So excellent. And I will have plenty to move around. Great. So based on the outcomes of this series, today's session, we're going to talk a little bit about how to build in student interaction in an online course, just a little bit, and give you some ideas. And then we're going to go into all the functionality of the Carmen Zoom breakout rooms. We'll talk about how to set them up, how to manage them, how to debrief them. And about 3/4 of the way in, I'll actually have you in a breakout room answering a question in a group. So you can experience it from the student side. And then as Queenie mentioned, as you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try and figure out a way to answer those. And at the very end, we always stay about 5 or 10 minutes after the session. If you have new questions or we just didn't get to your question adequately and you want more information, you are welcome to stick around at the end, and we will unmute you and then we can talk through your questions. All right. So I would like for you to look at my beautiful animals here and think about which animal looks like the way you feel today. So I had my phone call at 5:55 a.m. that my 3 kids had a snow day when it was like the one day that they were going into school today. So I kind of look a lot like that owl. So what I'm going to have you do, you're welcome to do it in the chat, but what I'd like for you to do, I'm going to enable annotation for you. So now you should see down on the bottom a little annotate with a little pencil. If you click on that, you're going to get a menu. And there's one that has a check mark and it says stamp. And you could check the checkbox or you could do a heart. And I just want you to go ahead and click on the picture to tell me which picture kind of represents how you feel today. We have a big giant circle too. Yep. Any kind of annotation. I just want you to get a feel for how the annotation tool even works.
I wonder if folks have to click on the view options button and click in annotate.
Could be.
You might see a view options button kind of top middle of your window if you're on a computer. If you click on that, there should be an option that says annotate, and that might bring it up for you.
I see people are still finding us. It also depends on how big your thing is. It could be under the, there could be 3 dots that you have to click on. All right. We're all over the place in terms. No one is the ostrich. That's a happy ostrich. He looks like he's screaming, but he's actually supposed to be a happy ostrich according to the alt text. Jean is a happy ostrich, maybe. Oh, no, Jean's not a happy ostrich. All right. So I can see that we're a little bit all over the place, which is great and lovely. So thank you for playing with the annotation tool. I just need to get out of the annotation tool. Hold on. I'm going to disable it. All right. So I like to do these kinds of things, honestly, because I feel like as instructors or as Meeting Hopes. Let me get rid of I have to clear the annotations here. I feel like it's good to check in with people, whether you're teaching. So 50% of you are talking about teaching using this tool. It's good to check in with your students, maybe on a more regular basis or, just a couple of times. But I think it's kind of nice to see how they're feeling, to get a pulse of the class. So when you're doing meetings, sometimes that's helpful. For those of you who were doing workshops, I find it particularly helpful. So I know, is everyone grumpy today? And I just need to be extra happy? Or is everyone really excited and I can just kind of plow through? Okay, so thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about, get out of my annotation tool. Let's talk a little bit about why we're even talking about student-to-student interactions today. So I put on the screen just a whole bunch of reasons why we want, I'm saying student-to-student, but since so many of you are doing this for other reasons, just think about participant to participant, right? When we're doing these kinds of meetings or classes, we're wanting our participants to learn. And there's just an immense amount of data out there to help us understand why this is useful. And generally what we know, hands down, is that learning does happen from peers. There is very much a social aspect of the learning process. By helping to teach other people, by asking good questions of other people, right? We learn that content better. And that's all part of kind of our active learning tool set, right? Where we help our students or participants practice with the material, right? So we want to get them talking to each other because we want them to try things out. But because we're in an online environment, it is also incredibly useful to find ways to connect in this online environment when we're all sitting at home, for example. And part of that connection is just being seen and heard, which is important for all of us, but particularly for those of us who are teaching and thinking about our students. It's hard being at such a large university, and it's hard now being in a pandemic and online. So as much as we can find ways to get students to talk to each other and talk to us, they feel seen and heard, right? And that will help their learning. And then I also want you to think about, as we move along today, how we can use this tool, so the breakout rooms, and getting them to participate and interact with each other. How do we use that for formative feedback? And what I mean by formative feedback is it's not a quiz or assignment that like we may give points to, but it is a way that we can learn from, right? So formative feedback means we're getting some cues about how well they're learning or not. So there are lots of different types of interactions that we could be doing in our Carmen Zoom spaces. So maybe you want to think about a particular workshop or course or meeting that you are going to be hosting soon. And I want you to think about, is a breakout room a good time for you to have your participants just share? Is that where they share their opinions or share examples of things or their interpretation of a film that they watched, or what questions they have about the reading that they just did? Or maybe those interactions are really about practicing, right? So maybe you're doing case studies, right? You've done all of this lecturing, or you've shared this big, right, list of information, and now you want them to actually either problem solve with it. You want them to look at specific cases and try and practice those skills, or maybe even doing some role playing. I have done role playing when I have done particular meetings, and it allows a space where a few people can go outside of like the whole big group and practice the kinds of skills by doing that role playing. Or finally, maybe you want your participants to create. So by create, I mean, maybe they are creating a product or a presentation, and when you had them face to face, you could just say, everyone scooch around, find a couple partners, find some space, but you can't do that right online. So the breakout rooms allow you to literally put them in their spaces, and maybe that's where they are creating a presentation that they're going to then show the rest of the class, or a product or a design, right? There's a workshop that's coming up next week where Sarah Holt and Sherry Beck, they're the facilitators, and they're doing one on collaborating in an online space. They're going to actually be having participants do a jigsaw, and a jigsaw is just when you break up information into parts. So maybe, for example, there are 4 cases that you want your students to look at, and you break your students up into 4 groups, and then you mix the groups the second round so that there's a representative from each of the 4 groups, right? So now you have a new configuration, so that now they're actually learning about all 4 things. So if you come to that workshop, you'll experience what that looks like. And then I also just gave an example of a concept map, right? This is just a way to generate knowledge or help you understand what the knowledge is and how things relate to each other. So maybe they're in there using the whiteboard or using some other collaborative doc to put together and map out, right, the information that they just learned. So those are some kinds of examples of the ways that we could use our breakout rooms. And I want to take just a moment to talk about how you can configure these. So the first is, right, that you could just create the groups. And there are different ways that you can create the groups. So you could decide that your group is consistent. Every time we get together for this course, my students will be in these 6 groups, because this is a team-based course, right? And they're always they're in labs together, right, the whole term. Or maybe you change them up a few times, but they're pretty consistent, right? Or maybe they're extemporary, meaning on the spot, like what we're going to do today. On the spot, I'm just going to create groups, and I'm going to create ones that they're just going to change, right? If we did a couple of them, I'm just going to mix them up constantly. And those could be random, or they can be intentional. And the way that I did, the way I'm going to do the more intentional groups is the way that I had you guys put down with an asterisk. If you had experience in this, maybe you ask your students, put a 1 next to your name if you read, right, this reading, and put a 2 if you read this reading instead, right? You can ask them anything, but if they rename themselves, then it allows me, when I go ahead and create random groups, it's not exactly random, it's very intentional, because I will make sure that certain people are in certain groups. That's what I mean by intentional. And I totally stole this idea from Dan Levy. He talked about doing this, and I love it. So the second thing is, and a second way to configure rooms is through students self-selecting. So one of the nice things that Carmen Zoom had added, I think it was maybe autumn, Queenie, sometime in autumn-ish, they added the option of students actually selecting their own groups. And I'll show you how you would go about doing that. But basically, you set up groups, you name them certain things, maybe it's group 1, or maybe it's case study 3, or whatever it is. You rename your groups, and then you make it so that students can select which ones they want to go to. Okay, so that's really nice. I'm not going to have us do that today, but I thought about it. But instead, I'm going to do this one with asterisk. So that is something really interesting, though, right? You do that in the classroom or in a workshop, like find a couple people, right? Maybe they pick a room. Oh, I love these other 2 bullets. I also stole this from Dan Levy. I didn't steal. I borrowed from what he taught me in his book. So there are some really interesting ideas I love. And one of them is, think about, for the activity that you want your students to do in a breakout room, do they have to work in a group? Maybe you could even rename one of your breakout rooms, working with a GTA or a co-teacher. So I'm going to put you in groups, but if you're really kind of like feeling like you just need to talk to the TA right now, or my co-teacher, and you just want a little bit extra help, maybe that's the group that they can select, rather than selecting, right, what the other groups that you set up. Or you could give them the option of not getting into a room and instead stay in the main room if they have a lot of questions. So it's kind of like the same thing of being in a room with the GTA, but you could just stay in the main room and just have students who are just not ready to join a group. Not ready to jump in. They can stay with you in the main room and ask questions. That may not be a great option. And Kathleen, I'll talk about all the renaming stuff. I'll show you. So just think about what makes sense for your group. I love the idea, though, of giving students choices. It doesn't always work out for your class. Maybe it doesn't make sense for the workshop that you're doing, but it's something interesting to consider. All right, so let's talk about setting up those breakout rooms. I spent too much time talking about getting excited about the kinds of groups you can set up. All right, so we're going to talk about the meeting settings, forming groups, naming groups, or renaming groups, Kathleen, and how do you kind of give a time limit to those groups. So first and foremost, I want to just quickly show you there's really only one setting that you need to worry about. So I am showing you, this is just going to osu.zoom. Whatever it is, the zoom.osu.edu, is that what it is? And I am in my settings. So this is the settings for your, for all of your Zoom spaces, right? They're also in the basic session, we go through how there are settings for individual sessions as well, or individual rooms. So this is under settings, and it's easy just to find it here under in meeting advanced. So in the meeting, what are some things that you can do? And you just need to make sure that you have clicked on the breakout room option. I have allowing the host to assign participant to breakout rooms when scheduling. That is a preset. So you can set up rooms prior. I'm going to be honest with you, though, today I have decided I'm not even going to really show you that option. And the reason why I'm not going to show you that option is I haven't found a single person where it actually works well. There are always challenges. And if you want to stick around at the end, we can kind of walk you through how to do that. But it's, even Zoom admits it's not the best option. I think if you're going to have consistent groups, that it would probably be easiest to put somewhere on your Carmen page, for example, what the groups are, so your students just know, and then you set up the groups you rename the groups so that it's based on however many groups you have, and you just tell them to select the one that they're going into. That's probably the easiest option. But let's say that you are in the space right now, like we are, and we're going to put you into groups. So these are my kids in the background. I told them not to put their picture, and some of them, they put pandas and lions, and fake names. These are not their names. So I wanted to show you some examples. It's really hard to show you the back end of what it looks like when you're a host, because you are not seeing these options right now because you are not a host. So I gave you a lot of screenshots in here so that you can see what it looks like on the back end. So what happens is I will click this breakout room. Let me find a pen here. Okay, see this breakout room button down here? It looks like a little window panel. I'm going to click that, and then you're going to get this nice little window that pops up that says breakout rooms. And you have 3 choices. You can assign automatically. So you just let the system do it on its own. Like Zoom, just put them randomly, right? You can assign them manually, where you're going to tell the system how many rooms do you want, and then you're going to click on which rooms to move them to. Or you can do that third option, which I mentioned, where you let students choose which room to go to. Okay, so let's say I clicked on the set up automatically. So this is the random Zoom do the work for me. What happens in this slide is I tell it how many, I'm pointing to it, you can't see me pointing, how many rooms you want there to be. And as you click up and down with the number of rooms down here on the bottom, it will start to change the numbers. So you don't have to really worry about the math in the moment, because in the moment it's like you're kind of stressed because you're like, let me set up the breakout rooms, and all the students or participants are waiting for you. You'll see, you'll have that experience. So what I will be doing when I set you guys up is I know I want 6 groups. So I'm going to try and click on, I'm going to go up to 6, and I'll get a sense of whether or not that gives me, depending on how many people there are today. If I only have 1 or 2 people in a room, that means I have too many. So I'll knock it down to 5, and then it will probably end up being 2 to 3. So that's how you adjust this when you're doing it automatically. And then this window, I just made it bigger for you. This window will pop up, and you will see that I only had 3 students in this fake class here. So you can see room 1 has these 2, and room 2, they stuck Izzy. Okay, so that's what happens when you ask the system to do it on its own. If you click on set it up manually, what's going to happen is it's going to pop up this window. You're going to tell it how many breakout rooms you want. In this case, I said 2. So it gives me 2 breakout rooms. And then what I have to do is I have to click on this little assign button. And when I click that on, then I'll be able to click which students I want in each session. So you can see it's a little time consuming, but it works. So Kathleen had asked, how the heck do I rename? Which is an excellent question. So regardless of what method you use, any of those 3 options, when you create a breakout room, you can rename them. And how it looks now is that there's a little, see right here, right next to the name. These start off with room 1, room 2, room 3. And I rename them based on cases, because I was just pretending like, okay, we're going to be doing some case studies. So this one's case A. And then you can see I wanted to make this one case B. You just click on the button, it opens up a window, and you just type what you want and say yes or no. Pretty simple. Okay. When you create rooms where your students can choose, it's going to look more like this option. And you're not going to have any of this over here. So this won't be here. And instead, you're just going to have room 1, room 2, right? And then you can rename the rooms, and then your students will pick. All right. So then before you actually put them in the rooms, you have to do some stuff. And what you'll probably want to do is make sure that you have set this up correctly. So do you see down here in this previous screen, there's the little gear or flower, I think it's gear. Down there, you will want to click on that before you start the breakout room, because there are some settings within the breakout rooms that you want to set up. Okay, so right here, there are some choices, right? You can, this one in particular, Automatically move all participants into the breakout rooms. I'll have to decide in the moment when we do ours. Do I want Zoom to just throw you into a room automatically? If I don't click on that, what happens is your students will get a little sign that says, the host has invited you to participate in breakout room, whatever. And then you click yes or no to join. I guess that's polite and a nice thing to do. For our workshops, I haven't been doing that. I've just been like throwing everybody into a breakout room. So it's just a lot quicker and I don't have to rely on the participants to pay attention and to get into the rooms. The downside is when you have participants who are not really there, they have a pretty profile picture, or their name, but they're not actually participating. If you get them all into a room, then you may have people who are not actually participating. That has happened to us. So that's just some pros and cons of those things. And then I always like to check that allow participants to return at any time to the main session, but you may not want that. You may want your students, for example, in that session, in the breakout rooms for the whole time, and you don't want them coming back in. And it doesn't feel good to me, but I'm doing this for workshops. So I always want people to have the option to leave their rooms. And then lastly, we want to think about how long do you want this to go on for? So you want to type in how many minutes. I always like for it to notify me a time when the time is up. It will pop up. I'll show you an example here in a moment. And then I always like a countdown so it's not so abrupt, so that your participants will see this teeny tiny little countdown that says you have 60 seconds, right? And you can set this for whatever number you want. You'll see it's like anywhere from 5 to 2 minutes, I think. So when you click on that, it will give your students a countdown so they can just close up their conversations. All right. So what's going to happen after you do all of that is then you will see down here, so you've done the gear, you've done all your renaming if you want to. And now I'm going to click open all rooms. Then they'll all go in their rooms. And when they are done, when they are finished and you close their rooms, which I'll show you here in a moment. Oh, there's my kitty cat joining us. There's Peanut the cat. Thank you, Peanut. You can recreate or use the same rooms again in the same session. So if you want to have groups meet up several times or even just twice, and you want it to be the same groups, when you click on the breakout room, the little window pane thing, you click that on, what's going to show up is the list that you already had. So it automatically starts here with this list because this is the room setup I just had in the previous one. So you can then just open all the rooms and then they're back to their same groups. Or you can click this recreate button over here. And what happens is that then this window opens and then you can start over to say, no, I need to reassign them because I'm doing a jigsaw and now I need to move them all around. Or nope, I just like for them to randomly be shuffled again. Okay. Or I want them to choose again. So that's what that recreate button means. It means if you want to redo what you had done before. Okay. So, and this is only within one session. It doesn't carry over. Okay. It's just within that one time that even if you have a consistent breakout room or Zoom room, the breakout rooms don't continue through classes. We often get that question. All right. So now let's look at what happens when they're in a room. So here they are. My Jane, Susan, Izzy, and Sarah. Can you tell my tween daughter did that? They're all girl names. So they're all in a space together. And what I wanted to show you is that, it's kind of awkward when you only have 4 people and you don't have any videos. So this may be a good time for you to suggest that the participants in the breakout rooms turn on their videos, at the very least do a profile picture that is not of a panda, so that it's in the big room. I'm not uncomfortable with not seeing your faces. I would prefer to see your faces and I prefer to see some reactions, but I understand why you're not, right? There's 20 something people in this space, but in a small breakout room, that's a little awkward. So this is a time where it would be good to ask your students this would be a nice time for you to show your video or at least a profile picture. What I wanted to show you in here is this little button down here. It's ask for help. It's a little question mark. And that is where they will call you in if they need you. Like, oh boy, we're working on this and now I don't know what to do. And I'll show you actually what happens when they click that button here in a moment. All right. So I know there are a bunch of questions that have been going around. So what questions haven't I answered, Queenie, or that you haven't gotten a chance to answer?
Let me take a look. There's a recent one that just came in I haven't read yet. It is easy to forget or not see the time part in breakout rooms in the past. Had to time it myself. Is this an issue for anyone else? I would say yes for myself.
Yep. I definitely would make sure that you do that countdown and you give the time, because it does, as the host, at least give you a little warning. It does go away. But when they're about to close and you have the countdown, it does give you, I'll show you here in a moment, it does give you a pop-up screen that doesn't go away. So that part is nice. In the rooms, it's very hard to see. I'll show you an example of why.
Got a new one that came up here. So to reiterate, the recreate option puts students back into the breakout groups.
The opposite, Jared. The opposite. So I was thinking long and hard about this, of why they called it recreate. Because recreate in some ways means, oh, we're just recreating the same one. That's not, it means the opposite. It means that now you're going to reshuffle people. It will automatically come up with the rooms that they were already in. And if you want to change them, you'll click the recreate button.
Yeah, I would say that just a quick tip. One thing that I usually do forget to do is I forget to click the gear before I do the breakout rooms to set the timings. So for me, like a checklist is really nice because I'm presenting, I'm doing all these things, and I will usually forget to do that. So maybe have a checklist for yourself for times like that. Is there a list of terms and definitions for functions?
There is on the Zoom page, on like it's not in one easy place though. And I don't know if there's one on our TLRC. I will let Queenie see if we can find something, but I'm going to guess not. Only because they keep changing things.
Yeah. Is this specifically terms and definitions for regarding breakout rooms or just in general? I feel like that would be a pretty long list. I would say that the Zoom support, if you don't find what you're looking for in the TLRC, in that resource center that OSU has made for us, the Zoom support portal is pretty expansive. So it's really good to go in there and just kind of type in the question you think you have, and it does a pretty decent job. And they also have chat help as well that you can talk to, and they'll actually connect you to OSU's help if that's what's needed.
Yep. Oh, Jared, I'll answer your question here in a minute. I'm getting to that. Yeah, I agree, Kathleen. I don't even know that Dan has something like that. Maybe he does. I'll look through the book, but I do actually recommend his book. It's pretty good. But there are a lot of terms because there are a lot of functions. They just keep changing, and they keep changing the names of them too. It's hard. So we feel your pain, Kathleen. All right, let's talk a little bit about capturing work. So let's now say you've got them into their spaces. They're all in their rooms. How do you know what they're doing? And how can they communicate to each other beyond just verbally talking at each other? So I wanted to go through a few of these with you. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, if you haven't been doing this, in the breakout rooms, they have just about every function that you have as a host in the main room. So there is a chat window where they can keep notes for themselves. They can screen share a document or a slideshow that they're creating together, for example. They can use a whiteboard, which we talked about in the second session. But I'll give you a couple of screenshots so you can see what that means. Like you did some annotation, they can annotate. They can do a collaborative document, right? They can even record, but I want to show you what happens. You have to do something special to do that. All right, so let's look at the chat function. This answers your question, Jared, I think. So the first chat window was actually my chat window in a fake meeting that I was putting together last night at 8:10 apparently. And this is in the main room. So I had posted two things in the beginning, thanks for joining me today. And I just put up a random thing about, make sure you're using this address. So those first two messages, right? So these two happened while we were in the main room. And then I put everybody in a breakout room. And in the breakout room, so this was actually my fake Susan's, I took a screenshot of what it looks like for her, right? So she sees these first two messages, but then she was using the chat, right, to talk to her breakout room participants, like the folks that were in that room with her. So that's why I wrote, starting now, these messages are only seen by the breakout room participants. And then I moved us back to the main room. And so now that we're in the main room, right, this is what everybody can see when they're all back in the main room. I'm missing, right, this message. I can't see what happened in the breakout rooms. They're only available to the people that were in the breakout rooms, and they do stay with them in the main room. Does that answer your question, Jared? Was that what you were looking for? Okay, I do want to show, remember Queenie said earlier, like if you're on a phone, for example, you may have to do a lot of swiping. I just wanted you to see, if you haven't, a lot of students will do this on their phones or their iPads, which is great, right? We gave them iPads, they should use them. The challenge is it's not all open at the same time like you have on a desktop. So to find the chat, right, they'll need to go down here to more, then they need to click on this chat, and then it opens up a whole new window. And then when they're done with that one, they have to close this window to come back to the main room. So it's not ideal, but that's the reality of what happens when you're doing things on a tiny iPhone. So just know that your students may be struggling to keep up with chat in general, but they can. And in the breakout rooms, they can do the same thing that they can, right? If they were on their desktop, the chat will follow them through the breakout room into the main room. All right, I wanted to show you what the view of the whiteboard is. So again, we talked about whiteboard in the last session. The whiteboard is a function of the screen share. So you would click on this as a host, you would click on the screen share button, and then you get this lovely little menu that pops up here. Oh no, sorry. You click on the screen share, the share button, and then it opens up the options, and you pick the whiteboard one. And then once you click on the whiteboard, then you're in this window. And then you end up with a blank white screen with this little tool set on top. I'm showing you this as an example of what happens in the breakout room. It works the exact same way. And Kathleen, the whiteboard's been around since we had like pandemic times. The whiteboard's been around actually for quite some time. And the participants have always had the option of using the whiteboard as well. So this is in a breakout room. This is Susan decided to share see here, Susan, my panda Susan. She clicked on the share in her breakout room. And then she was able to have this list of tools. And then she can use this is a very pathetic version of, I was just doing some kind of graph. So you could see that they can do this in their rooms. What they can do though, so say you wanted them to map out or write, and you can do text in here. See, there's a text button. They can type out notes in here. If you want them to save this, then there's just a save button right here. And then you'll see this example, I actually click the save, and it will save on that student's in there. So they can't do this from a phone or an iPad, FYI. They can only do this from like a laptop or a desktop. It'll save, and it'll save into their where Zoom kind of keeps its own little folders that it will create folders and keep them in on your desktop, on your hard drive. Okay, so they can do this. They can also, in a breakout room, have their fellow participants use the annotate tool. And the only thing that they will need to do is what I did for you. So they would click on the share button at the bottom, right? Maybe they want to bring up a slideshow. In this case, they brought up a blank slide in a PowerPoint in this example, but they could bring up anything that they share, right? Any kind of document. And if you want them to annotate on it, whoever in the breakout room is doing the sharing, they have to click on this more button, and they have to enable annotation for others, which is what I had to do for you in the beginning. So that will allow the rest of the members in the breakout room to do this. One important thing to know Whiteboards, they can save, right? And then you can have them post that into, an assignment on Carmen, or they can email it to you so you can see what work they were doing. Annotations do not save. It's not a function. And you saw that actually it's not actually writing on the document, it's writing on the screen. So every slide, right, will keep those annotations. If you want your students to capture the work that they've done, if they are doing annotations, just have them screen share do a screenshot of their, of whatever it is that they're working on. And that way it'll save to them locally and they can share it with you later. So that's kind of an important piece to know about. Okay, you can also have them record. I discovered this the hard way with a session that I was doing in the autumn. However, in order to allow your students to record in the breakout rooms, you as the host, before you put them in breakout rooms, because once you put them in breakout rooms, they don't show up in your participants window anymore. So before you move them in, before you even do the breakout rooms, you need to go to each student that you want to give permission. You have to click on this More button and click Allow to record local files. Zoom did this because it was an automatic thing. And then, students were doing kind of funny things. So they added this kind of barrier to the process. But let's say, for example, how I asked you to put asterisks if you were you had experience. Maybe I already know, in my breakout rooms, I'm just going to assign, right, one person to be able to record. What it does is it will record that breakout room. Like if you're doing a role play, for example, and you want to actually be able to see them do that role play, or you're teaching a language class and you want them to practice talking to each other, just allow one student per each room to record, and then it saves it to their desktop. Again, they can't do this on an iPad or a phone. They have to do it on a desktop. And then they can send it to you and submit it through Carmen or through email later. So if you want them to record, that's the extra step you have to take. If you have a lot of students, you probably don't want them recording anyway. Okay. So I want to get you into breakout rooms. While I am setting you up in breakout rooms, I want to make sure we don't have any other questions, Queenie. That's not true. I want to go through one more set of slides quickly and then. Yes, and then that person presses the record button. They'll get a little record button on the bottom.
I think we've got everything else.
Great.
A little bit earlier, but
all right.
If you think we missed it.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's just, before I get you in the groups, let me quickly just go over what things look like here. So this is managing the groups. So you can send them broadcasted messages, right? There's a little broadcast button that you click and you can type this in. But I wanted you to see, on a phone or an iPad, this is the broadcast message. Do you see where I'm circling on this black one here? It's so tiny and it goes away in 5 seconds. So you can't put links in it because they can't click on it. Okay. You can do remember, you should be switching partners by now, or remember, we've got 3 more minutes. Okay. But it doesn't stay long and it is hard to read. I wish they would fix that. All right. So that's the broadcast. Quick, short, go away. All right. You can also join a room. So you can decide to join a room. So in your breakout room window that will say open in the main room until you close it, you can see all your groups and you'll have a little join button, right? So you just have to hover. So if I hover over each of these, this join button pops it. I push join and then I'm thrown into the other room. The opposite can occur where, remember I mentioned that they can click on this ask for help. If they're in a room and they want to ask you to join them, they click on this ask for help. And then this part pops up. You can invite the host and then you click on this invite host button. And then this one says, the host has been invited. And what happens on my end is I see Izzy in case A or room 1 asked for help. And then I can just click on this join the breakout room. Or let's just say Izzy asked for help, but I'm in with somebody else. Zoom knows that I'm in another breakout room. It will tell this participant that your host is helping other people and you're going to have to try again. But I will tell you that it does not log for the host. I won't have a list of these 3 people in this order asked for me. It doesn't keep track of that. That's why it says you'll have, please try again later, means that the group has to invite you again later. Okay, and then lastly, before I throw you into groups here, I wanted you to see what, when you are closing out the group, and if you set a countdown, right, that thing at the very bottom where I selected 60 seconds, this is what pops up for you and for your participants. You have one that says they have X number, now the countdown begins. Them in their room, in the breakout rooms, they get a little thing that says this. And they can actually leave now. You'll see, because I will let you leave. If they're done in that wrap up time, they can just come back to the main room, or they can just wait until it counts down to 0, and then it will throw them back in the main room. I get this little note, and it's like this tiny. It's way up on the top right. So just know that like some of these announcements are really tiny, but they get something that's much more obvious to them. They get a little screen right in the middle. All right. So I want us to, I don't know, I just want you to try it out for like 5 minutes or less. So if I were to debrief this activity, I would put up and share the document that you were all in so everyone could see what the answers were and we could talk about it. Or I could say, okay, someone from group 2 in the chat, or I can have you unmute yourself, right? Tell us a little bit, answered that. Right. So I love using collaborative documents like a lot because I think they're really valuable as a space where everyone can see what we're all doing. So in our last, minute, I shared very briefly kind of ideas for debriefing, but it does also provide you some feedback. So for example, one of my debriefing questions for you is, what was the breakout room like for you? You can put that in chat. If you could describe it in a word, what was it like? Okay, nice, good, right? This is the kind of formative feedback that's useful for me as the instructor. And I'm like, okay, then we can keep using these. That's what I mean by formative feedback, right? I get a sense of what those rooms were like for you. So I know some of you have to go. I wanted to make sure that I cover what kinds of resources are out there. So there's always consultations with folks like Queenie and I who can help you think through how to use the tool. If you have questions about the tool, like the tool is not working, it's not doing what I need it to do, you can contact our Carmen at osu.edu folks directly. That Teaching and Learning Resource Center, that the TLRC, as both Queenie and I talked about, you have the link for that. And then if it's just a big course design question, like I need help with just like even just thinking through what I'm going to do in this course, that's where the consultants at the Drake Institute be really helpful for you. As a former two-decade employee there, I know that they do great things. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you learned some new ideas today, maybe some new tips and tricks if you already were using breakout rooms.